Hello! I am Mac, at least for a day, and everything's going to be okay. In this video, I will be reading and responding to comments from the previous video, Will No Man's Sky get VR support? So the first comment is by JSpotJ. He says, I think VR support would be awesome. I don't have VR, but I might get it if it comes. Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't have a PSVR yet, but I'll definitely get one if No Man's Sky gets VR. I'll probably get one anyway since Dreams is coming out soon. Little spoiler for the future of my channel. But Dreams is supposed to have VR support, so I'll definitely be getting it for Dreams if it has VR, which it's supposed to. Ivano Forgione, I hope your name is Italian because I pronounced it like it was. He says, I got PSVR and No Man's Sky almost simultaneously in 2016. I definitely voted for VR in that survey. It's a marriage in heaven for me, really. I know it would be technically difficult. They would have to sacrifice a lot of view distance and graphic detail, but it would be worth it. Yeah, some of the people that are saying it would not be possible on PlayStation, I think it would be possible if Hello Games is willing to sacrifice some things like graphic detail and draw distance. So if it's true that you have to have 60 frames per second for VR to work, then they'd probably just have to make it so that VR mode has lower graphic detail and things like that. So hopefully they'll consider doing something like that to make VR possible, because I wouldn't mind giving up a little graphic detail and a shorter draw distance, you know, items popping in a lot closer to you if it means that we can have VR. Because when I'm in VR, I'm going to be looking at things close to me anyway. I'm not going to be worried about that things are popping in a little further away. Although if graphic detail is less, then I won't be able to look like at the like these flowers. You can kind of see veins on them, and the textures of this flower. You might not be able to see all of that if they have to sacrifice some graphic detail, but that's not too bad. I would rather they do VR than not do it to avoid sacrificing the graphics a little bit. And that's just if VR was a separate mode. I think that's the best way for them to go. That if you, well, sorry, I say mode, I don't mean a separate game mode. What I mean is, if you turn on VR, then your graphic settings will change to make VR possible. And then when you turn off VR, the game will go back to the current graphic settings. So that's an idea, and thank you, Ivano, for mentioning that. Richard's Gameplay said, I would love to play No Man's Sky in VR. Good, me too. Rossalaz58 says, hey Mac, smiley face, love your videos and I'm a long time fan. I hope you do add, I hope they do add VR support. Thank you, Ross, that was nice of you to say, and hopefully they will add VR support. THTDI Inc. says, VR support is a subject I don't have real interest in. I get why it would be beneficial for the game. I feel, however, before Hello Games and add VR support, they need to add content where it makes exploration more rewarding for the player. The game would require a lot of optimizing for what is required to run VR, but because of how it runs now, I'm on base PS4 and am not enjoying my playtime right now. He brings up a good point, especially when they added terrain tessellation. A lot of people on normal PS4 started to have a lot of difficulty with crashes and things. So I definitely agree they need to resolve those issues, or give us the option to turn off terrain tessellation on PS4. You can turn it off on PC, but you can't turn it off on PS4 for some reason. They definitely should do that, make it so that we can turn it off, because it is messing things up for people on base PS4. I'm on PS4 Pro, and I haven't experienced any trouble after they added terrain tessellation, but a lot of people on normal PS4s say they have. So they needed to resolve that. He says he wants more variation before VR. Some people say that. I think in a little bit someone else is going to comment that they can do both without sacrificing too much, but I'll talk about that when we get there. Plo617 says, the VR conversation always triggers many people in the community for some reason. Once you try VR, you realize how No Man's Sky is tailor-made for VR. I'm fine with there being limited VR for the time being. So he's kind of bringing up that I mentioned VR for No Man's Sky should probably be not full VR, that we should still just control our characters with the controller. It would probably be a lot of extra work for them to make controls for the Move controllers. I think PSVR works with these different controllers, and I don't know how easy it would be to make all the functionality in No Man's Sky with those. So I think they should just have the camera be controlled by the VR headset and everything else still controlled by the regular controller. So yeah, he's okay with VR being limited, and he would prefer that they go ahead and do VR, even if it isn't like, you know, super great VR. Just get some kind of VR into No Man's Sky for the time being, and they can always work on perfecting it later. Illuminati says, I think after the 2.0 update, we could get VR support. Before that, they need a better heads-up display for first person, like scaling the multi-tool to the same size it is in third person and having hand animations. Next, they need a full interior for starships, because now you can see the edge of the cockpit. So I'll show a couple things that he's referring to. Well, first of all, you can see my gun doesn't look that big in third person, but if I switch to first person, my gun looks huge. It looks like I've got this giant hair dryer right up against my face. But in first person, it's like this little gun down by below my shoulders. So I agree that they should do some scaling in first person, or completely change first person, because first person is exactly the way it was before they added third person with no changes. They should do scaling, and like he said, add hand animations, because just like before we had a character model, you never ever see your hands in first person. You just see the multi-tool. So I think they should revamp first person before they do VR, like he said, because we would need to be able to see our hands and things like that. Make it so that, like, when you reload, you kind of just move the multi-tool a little bit. I think even in third person, when you reload, there's a new animation. So let's see. How do you reload again? I just forgot the control for reload. Oh, there it is. See, when you reload in third person, I put my hand on my multi-tool, much like you would when you reload a gun. But in first person, you still just move the multi-tool a little bit, and you don't use your hand. You can't see your hand in it. So they should totally revamp the first person animations to include your hand and all that. That would make it more immersive, and make it better for when they add VR, if and when they add VR. So thank you for that. Interesting comment, brought up a new thing I hadn't considered. And of course he wants full interior starship, which I mentioned. Even on PlayStation without mods, I think when you're in a exotic ship, there, at least it used to be, you could look around your cockpit and see the edge of the cockpit where it disappears. So they still need to complete the interior of the cockpit so that there's graphics all the way around your body, so that in VR we could turn around and look behind ourselves at the seat we're sitting in. I think that would really help. And we'd also have to be able to see our body. That's a good point, because we were talking about in third person. In first person, when you look down, you can't see your body still, even though we have a character model now. There's still just blank space, like I'm invisible again. So they need to change so when you look down in first person, you can see your body, and so that when we look down in VR, we can see our body. So I think that would be a really important change for them to make. So anyway, moving on, Harris Bernstein says, it would be awesome if you could switch between VR mode and normal mode. So yeah, like I said, I think VR should be not a separate game mode. I don't think that's what he's suggesting. It's not what I was suggesting. Just that you would go to your settings and maybe even have to exit the game. Like maybe you'd have to exit the game, choose VR mode, much like you choose to either play single player or jump into someone else's game. There would also be a menu option to choose to load the save in VR mode. So when you load in, everything would be changed, and you'd have to have your VR headset on and everything, and then you would start playing your same save in VR mode. And if you want to turn off VR mode, then you'd have to save, close out the game, and restart in normal mode. So that's just an idea, and he agrees with me that that's probably how they would do it, especially if, graphics are going to be lower in order to make VR work for PlayStation and such. Zen Air Zulu says, as a more chill game, I think VR would work nice. I don't think twitchy shooters will ever work in VR. So I don't know much about other first-person shooter games, but I guess they've tried to have them in VR and maybe they don't work as well. But yeah, No Man's Sky is very much a game about walking around and enjoying the sights. There is combat, but I don't think VR would make combat much more difficult. I don't think it would make it, so that we would get killed all the time. Because combat itself in No Man's Sky is very easy. Unless you're fighting like multiple sentinel walkers or something, you're rarely ever going to die, so it's not that serious. I can imagine in some other famous popular first-person shooter, when you're, having a shootout against other players or something like that, that the people in VR probably would be at a disadvantage because it might be more difficult to control, or the other way around. It could be an unfair advantage to be in VR if other people aren't. So I don't know how all that has worked, but I can see what he's saying, that VR may not work for other first-person shooters, but it would work for No Man's Sky's gameplay. Max792 says, I've never played a VR game or even tried one of the handsets. However, if there is any game I can imagine would be perfect for it, it would be No Man's Sky. So he also agrees that No Man's Sky is a game that VR would work really well with. Cyborian, the Unknown Explorer, says, please let VR come to No Man's Sky for PC and PlayStation. Him commenting this made me remember the other problem with PlayStation. Nobody else commented this, and I forgot to mention this in my original VR video. But a big problem with them adding VR is it's not possible on Xbox right now. He commented that he wants it to come for PC and PS4, but that made me realize that would leave out the Xbox people, because as far as I know, there's definitely no native VR for Xbox. I don't know if it's possible for someone to hardwire a HTC Vive or a Oculus Rift into the Xbox, but I know there's not native VR support for the Xbox. So that if they did add VR support for PlayStation, it might make the Xbox people upset. That doesn't mean I don't want them to go ahead and try to do it, but that is another possible reason why Hello Games might decide not to do it. And we'll get into that a little bit more. I want to go ahead and read the last comment. My good friend Boomstick Joe said, VR for No Man's Sky would most likely be PC only, as the current PS4 Pro is not powerful enough to handle it. I don't think working on VR and variation is mutually exclusive. Artists can add content without dev support. So he kind of disagrees with me and also mentions something that I like, that I mentioned earlier. First of all, Boomstick Joe is one that thinks PSVR would not be able to work with No Man's Sky, and he may be right about that. My stance is I want them to try to do VR somehow. Maybe if they can't do it on on PlayStation, at least do it on PC. I want them to go ahead and do some kind of VR support for No Man's Sky, even if it's only on PC. I don't have a PC. I'm not a PC player. I probably never will be. But I would be fine. I for one would not be upset if they made VR support for No Man's Sky on PC only, because at the very least it would help No Man's Sky get more popular, at least on PC. So I really think it would help the game. Ooh, nice. I think it would help the game regardless of whether they could do it on PlayStation or not. So I want them to do some kind of VR no matter what. So that's my stance. And PlayStation and Xbox people might be sad that they can't do the VR. Just like I'm always sad that I can't do mods on PlayStation in No Man's Sky, but I'll get over it. I'm not mad anymore that I can't do mods, and I won't be mad very long that I can't do VR. But I want PC to get it just so that there can be some availability of VR for No Man's Sky, because I think it's worth it for both Hello Games as a company and for No Man's Sky as a game to be successful and to continue having more updates and becoming more popular and all of that. And lastly, Boomstick Joe mentions he believes that they can add variation and VR at the same time. So Hello Games has reportedly like 24 or more employees by now. They used to have a lot less, and a lot of them are artists, and I believe the artists can add assets to the game, and they would not be the ones working on VR anyway. The artists don't do a lot of the coding for the game or anything. So the artists can make more variation for the game. They can make more types of planets and such, while the while the other coders are working on VR for the game. So I think the people that have said that it would distract from them doing variation to do VR, I think is not fully valid. It might, obviously, if everybody in the entire team was gung-ho working on variation the entire time, the updates for variation would go a bit faster. But they can work on both at the same time. It might slow things down a bit, but if they're going to work on VR, it's definitely not going to be the whole team working on VR. Artists can still work on variation while coders work on VR. So I agree with Boomstick Joe that they don't have to be mutually exclusive. They could work on both. And Hello Games always adds more than one thing at once. Every single update, there's been multiple new features added. They've never just done one thing. Foundation wasn't just base building. Pathfinder wasn't just Exocraft. It added base sharing and things like that. Atlas Rises wasn't just story, it was tons of other new features. You can look at the patch notes on the website. So if and when they add VR, it's going to be an update that includes a lot of other stuff, probably more variation, probably other things that people have asked for. So I'm not concerned that them adding VR is going to ruin the next update and there won't be anything that anybody else wants. So from these comments, I can conclude that there probably were quite a few people that did vote for VR in that survey. That was one of the reasons I wanted to do this video, because we don't know the results of the survey, and asking my viewers is the only way I can get a bit of a sample size to figure out what the results of the survey were. So based on how many comments were favorable for VR, I would say there probably were quite a few people that did vote on VR. And so I think that Hello Games probably are working on VR. So that's my bit of speculation for this video. I think Hello Games, maybe right now, VR is one of the things they're working on. Now, whether that's going to be PC only VR support, or if it's going to include PSVR, I don't know. It won't include Xbox, we know, which is kind of a shame. But at the very least, I am of the opinion, and I'm predicting, that Hello Games are working on VR support now. They mentioned it in their survey, and I think probably a lot of people did vote on it. So we'll probably find out by the end of this year if they worked on VR support or not. So that's about it for this video. I'll be back this weekend with another video with a new topic for us to discuss about what's coming in the future for No Man's Sky. But for now, I have been Mac. Thank you for joining me for a day. And remember, everything's going to be okay.